Our sixth question begins with Ms. Dean.
Ms. Dean, Connecticut is ranked 49th out of 50 in terms of pension liabilities as a percentage of state revenue. What steps will you take as governor to improve that ranking and fulfill the state's contractual obligations?
Well, I have said very clearly that there are two very important things that we need to do in this state. And one is to make sure that government does what government is supposed to do, and only, and does it very well, and that government stops infringing on our core constitutional rights. That's a much smaller government than we have in place right now. So I agree with a comment of, I believe it was Mr. Loretti earlier, where he said we need to downsize the government, and that has to be done immediately before we can start cutting taxes. I have proposed to end public sector unions. This is not controversial. This was a bipartisan view of public sector unions for many, many years. FDR warned against public sector unions. JFK warned against public sector unions. There is this cycle of money that goes from state workers to politicians to state workers that we can't break. And it's just going to cost us more and more. So these issues have the fiscal health of the state has to be dealt with immediately. That means transparency. That means cutting costs immediately. The next governor is not going to be popular, and I'm very comfortable being unpopular. I was raised to make tough decisions and not worry about what the consequences were of popularity, because what I care about is doing what's right, and ultimately that becomes very popular when people see the results of those policies.
Thank you. Mr. Bowden.
We're going to have to make some large swings at our pension program as well as our retiree medical program. So what I would do on the state level is what I've done in Danbury, which I've taken our new employees, people that were hired prior to a certain date, and eliminated the pension program and replaced that with a defined benefit program. It's actually been very popular with our employees, and frankly, if you're not working for the state at that moment and you get hired, you really don't know the difference. We also then ought to implement a buyout program for current employees to get them out of the pension system as fast as possible so that we can bend the cost curve over the long term. Those are a couple of strategies that we ought to do right away to be able to present certainly a much better pension picture going forward. I'd also tell you that we need to end the bonus program that the state of Connecticut has. It is absurd that we're giving out tens of millions of dollars in bonuses that aren't linked to merit. I mean, we're giving people a raise just because they're breathing, and that simply isn't acceptable in this new world that we all live in. In Danbury, I've created a merit-based bonus program for those employees, those department heads that exceed expectation and save taxpayer dollars. We've also will need to end some of the current abuses that go on with the pension system. For example, loading up your overtime for the last 3 years so that you can get a higher pension when you leave. You can't do that in Danbury because I negotiated that out of the contracts to make sure that we didn't have people that are abusing our system. All of these strategies will be tough to do, they'll be difficult, but they have to be done. The problem that we have right now, we don't have anybody sitting in the room that's representing you, the taxpayer. We are somebody that's representing the special interests of the state.
Thank you. Mr. McKinney?
Truthfully, this is the most significant problem we as a state face and the next governor has to deal with. Our unfunded pension and healthcare liabilities are the worst or second worst in the nation. We are soon at risk of becoming Detroit or General Motors if we don't handle the problems. And the next governor has to tackle this. You must get rid of the abusive and fiscally unsustainable policies. People who engage in overtime spiking so that they end up with an annual pension greater than their highest salary ever was. That practice needs to be eliminated. Looking at practices where you can appoint someone to be a judge at age 67 and they have to retire at age 70 and they get a $100,000 plus a year pension every year. Governor Malloy's just nominated 3 people who will get that. We need to eliminate double dipping where people, especially in higher education, retire, get hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual pension payments, and then go back and are being paid the same salary or 75% of their salary to work. We need to get rid of longevity bonuses. I fought for years to get rid of that, where state employees simply get a bonus just for surviving another year. We need to do that. New hires need to be in defined contribution plans, not defined benefit plans. We need to look at health care costs. State employees deserve health care, but not the health care plan right now because you're paying for it, and it's the most expensive health care plan anywhere there is. And we also need to talk about having another early retirement incentive. It worked under Governor Rel, and it can work again.
Thank you. Mr. Foley?
Well, the first thing I do is try and get all of you to help me get rid of Denise Napier, because last year when the benchmark on pension fund portfolios went up by about 16%, ours went up 1%. So that means that that's going to have to be fulfilled with your tax dollars in the future. So if we had a decent treasurer who was making a good return on the pension assets, the burden would be less. I also would stop the gaming of the system that's been mentioned several times here already. The judge that this governor recently appointed is only going to be able to serve for 3 years before he has to retire. It's going to cost the state possibly millions of dollars. That kind of gaming of the system is part of the culture up at the Capitol that I, as an outsider, will seek to get rid of. It's very common when people get elected governor or get positions where they can appoint people who have low pensions, such as our legislators who are part-time, lower income state worker or have state compensation. 2 full-time jobs, and sometimes it's only for a couple of years, then they qualify for a lifetime pension that's a much higher rate. And finally, we simply need to reform the pension benefits that's offered to new employees, whether it's a defined benefit plan or something else. It should be equivalent to what a similar type of work would earn in the private sector.
Thank you. Mr. Loretti.
Part of the financial health that I talked about earlier is directly associated with your pension liability. And in the state of Connecticut, it is off the charts. I think our unfunded liability is somewhere around $43 billion as it pertains to pensions. And that there are a lot of our employees that currently are working who are new into the equation that are in jeopardy of maybe not seeing this pension. And so, you know, in government, we have a responsibility to ensure that our obligations are met. This is certainly one of them. It's been mentioned here several times tonight about all of the waste and abuses associated with how people obtain the pension. I certainly agree with those comments. Those have to stop. In my community, our pensions are 100% funded, and they're fair for our employees. As the system is designed right now at the state level, it is not fair, and it's not sustainable. And so we have to get more realistic and more practical about the type of benefits that we offer our employees, starting with all new hires. That was also mentioned. Now, that won't be easy. It will certainly be another one of those monumental challenges that you're going to have a dialogue with our employees and our state unions to be able to accomplish this. And you're also going to have the support of the state legislature, which is key to success in this state going forward. So I would work to establish relationships with those groups.
Thank you. Mr. Visconti.
Yes, first thing is freeze hiring. We're speaking about new hirees. That's the last thing I want to hear is new hirees. Freeze hirings across the state of Connecticut. I'm on the record on television and a few other places stating a plan that I have. And I've been running this by many union members who have been approaching me because the number one concern they have, state employees, is they're going to lose their pension. They're not worried about losing their job, they're worried about losing their pensions. And this Federal Reserve of Philadelphia 2 weeks ago sent a signal that they're looking at raising short-term lending between banks at 3.5% in 2 years. That means interest rates are going up, and I believe they will go up. We're in a bad situation where we have high debt, and right now I think we ought to look, as a governor, I would look immediately at $300 to $500 million in non-essential programs being put into a lottery, like our names are put in here, and chosen to be mothballed, non-essential, and put funding into the union pensions. They've got to come to the table, and we need to accelerate payments, shorten the term, going from like a 30-year mortgage to a 15-year mortgage while rates are low. We need the union's help at the table doing this. I believe that they will come to the table because right now, Connecticut is, we're in dire straits. They know it, and the pension liability is what will finish us off.
Thank you very much.